What did you talk about? I'm assuming that you all have perfectly found the balance between rest and works, between Sabbath and works. What did you discuss in your groups? How do you find this balance between Sabbath and works?
We talked about how it doesn't necessarily like, it could be an activity, like eating at a coffee shop that replenishes your soul, and you gotta take care of yourself in order to really be able to show up and build that solidarity with your community.
Yeah, rest doesn't have to look like sleeping, right? Have you ever been too tired to rest well? That's when I'm scrolling on TikTok for like hours, because I'm like too tired to actually rest well and engage with my family. I've got nothing left, right? Who knows?
I really like Kristen's idea. She described Sabbath. She loves the word that's like homecoming, and framing it like that. Like that was really resonant with me. And thinking about how rest doesn't have to be laying down and like doing this activity myself, but like where do I feel like I'm coming home to like a truthful, positive version of myself and my community. And so it's making me think that we all have busy schedules and we work really hard, but like, can we actually find restfulness within those spaces and like make time for it in that way? So I just really like thinking of it and creating it.
That's really interesting. I like that too, that concept of homecoming, of coming home to yourself, coming home to your community, coming home to God, right? Those three relationships that where the work of Christianity is to restore, right? That's where that kind of like the work and the rest kind of come together, is the restoration of our relationship with the land, with each other, and God. That homecoming, I really like that. It's good.
Sarah had this analogy of like, if you have like a messy room in your house, the like doom scrolling TikTok thing kind of feels like just throwing a blanket over that mess.
Yeah.
There.
Right.
But like once you're off your phone, or whatever it is, you come back and it's still there.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about like, there's sort of never going to be like an ideal time where the mess is gone, where we can say no to the rest. So like, we can stop chasing the ideal circumstances and just like acknowledge the dissonance, the problems out there, and like, things that are going to be internal strife, and say I'm going to rest for a few minutes. That sometimes can even give me like the actual like regulation or clarity.
Yeah.
Okay, how am I going to pick up the first one off the floor?
Right. Right. Yeah. That needing that rest in order to, like, the ways that our doom scrolling and our what we sometimes call rest is actually just us kind of covering up whatever is agitating us, whatever is there, right? Yeah. I love that idea. What else? One last one before we go.
In our group, we were talking about finding place, like a cafe or church or some place that's separate from, think about working from home.
Right. Yes. Working from home has changed Sabbath and rest, hasn't it? How many folks work from home, or at least work from home part of the time? Yeah. It's weird, right? It's weird. When I was in seminary, in my ethics class, my teacher put up an advertisement from the 80s of a fax machine. It was like when the fax machine was just coming out. There was a guy on the beach and there's a fax machine next to him, and it was like, work from wherever. And like at the time, it was meant to be this liberating thing, but we all took it as like, work from wherever, like we can reach you wherever you go. And that's only gotten worse as we've had work from home, right? This thing that is good and liberating in some ways, but also like, it messes with already unclear boundaries under capitalism between work and rest and living.
It blurs all the lines.
Yes, it blurs all the lines. And God forbid if you're working home from kids, like working from home with kids. Yeah. So how do we do this? And what I want to focus on this morning is really talking about how do we rest when it feels too dangerous to rest? How do we rest when resting feels too dangerous? Vicki, can I ask you to close that door if it's not? Oh, it's already closed. Never mind, it's totally fine. So we're continuing our series, this in-between series, right, where we're looking at the in-between of these two concepts, rest, Sabbath, rootedness, and work, the solidarity, the very, very important and critical work of solidarity. And we're looking at this weird parable this morning, the parable of the fig tree. Have you all, is this, one that you're familiar with? Is this one you go back to? Anyone's grandma have it, needle stitched onto a pillow? This is not one we talk about a lot. Because it's a weird one. It's a weird one. It's this idea between resting and bearing fruit. Bearing fruit. And bearing fruit is a phrase that Jesus uses over and over in the Bible to mean that what we do as Christians, what we do together, should have material consequences in the world. Because of our faith, the world should be more loving and kind and just. And the world is a big one, but maybe we can say because of our faith, this part of Logan Square should be more loving and kind and just, right? There should be a material expression of what we believe to our neighbors, our literal neighbors. And the heart of this parable is a question about the balance between resting and working for a better world. But it's also kind of a strange parable in that it leaves us with a lot of questions. The genre of parable is meant to be super easily understood, right? Jesus tells us these stories that you're like, duh, thank you, that's clear. I think about the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? It's good to help people. But this one is a bit of a strange one. Why is there a fig tree in a vineyard? That's not where fig trees go. Did somebody plant this, or did it just appear? Has anyone been taking care of it? Right? This also isn't the only time that Jesus gets angry about a fig tree not producing fruit. In Matthew and Mark, we see Jesus curse a fig tree for failing to give him fruit when he wants it. But Jesus is also in the wrong here, right? Or the vineyard, let's say that. The vineyard owner is in the wrong here. And Jesus' original audience would have known that because they would have been agriculturally sophisticated, right? They would have known that fig trees don't produce fruit for the first few years of their life. It's not a thing that happens. You can't make it go any faster. Fig trees need time to mature and to grow. They don't produce fruit until they grow into maturity. And we also have this Western hierarchical habit of immediately, what I just did, you just saw it in real time, immediately assigning God to the voice, God's voice, to whoever's the boss in the parable, right? But the vineyard owner is wrong. Often we read this parable and we say, God's coming in and God's like, you're not producing fruit, cut it down, throw it in the fire, and then somebody begs, please God, please give us a little more time. That's horrible. I don't like that. I don't want that. That feels awful. That's not my experience with God. But what if God's not the vineyard owner? What if God is the one saying, hold on. It's not time to throw it out yet. It's not time to cut it down. What if God is the one saying, it needs the rest? If you cut it down before it's ready, you're, as they say in recovery, you're quitting before your miracle, right? The work we do in this place, the work of faith, is the work of millennia. It's the work outside of time sometimes. God's work is beyond us, and it requires patience. It requires rest. It requires faithful Sabbath. But patience is hard, and it was hard for Jesus. Which makes sense because remember where we are in the story, right? Jesus and his disciples are walking towards his death. They are walking towards Jerusalem. Jesus knows what is coming. He knows what's at the end of this walk. They are walking towards his execution. So we can understand why Jesus might be impatient. We can understand why it doesn't seem fair to ask Jesus to rest and to wait, because his time is short. I heard a lot of you talking about how hard rest was for you. I'm in that club. I'm in the club of why aren't things happening faster? Why aren't things growing faster? Why aren't things I'm 100% in that club. So I get it. I feel that really deeply. And I feel that when I see Jesus' impatience, right? Jesus' impatience with the people, with the fig tree, cursing the fig tree. Give me fruit. You don't want fruit? And even last week, right? Or maybe it was 2 weeks ago when we talked about hospitality and Jesus' impatience of shake the dust of the feet off that place and move on. I get it. I feel that. Cole Arthur Riley. Anybody familiar? Cole Arthur Riley. Yeah. She wrote the book Black Liturgies, Prayers, Poems, and Meditations for Staying Human. And she talks about when rest feels like too great a risk. When stopping and waiting and being patient and waiting for the work we have done to come to fruition, to bear fruit, feels like a risk that we can't take. I've been trying to figure out how to rest. And rest in the way, Kristen, I like what you were saying, rest in the way that's that homecoming, that rootedness, that staying grounded. How do I stay grounded, not just for my family, but for what we're doing here? How do I stay grounded? And I've been turning to the stories of clergy who have lived through moments like this. Moments where you watch your country slide into fascism, and you feel really helpless to stop it. So I've been resonating and reading these stories of clergy who have lived through moments like this. And one of those stories is the story of Peter Story. Maybe you heard of him? So Peter Story was a white Methodist pastor, and eventually bishop, in South Africa during apartheid. So Peter Story is there during apartheid. And he's well known. He has one of these hero stories. He's well known for leading 25,000 person marches and being really courageous and standing up against apartheid and doing a lot of anti-apartheid work. But the way he got involved in this anti-apartheid work was not because he was particularly politically radical. One of the first appointments that he took as a clergy person was as a prison chaplain. And it just so happened that the prison he was assigned to was a prison for political prisoners with names like Nelson Mandela. And he took this job because the prison was on an island and he liked the water. And he got to take a boat to work every day. So God works in mysterious ways. But as he heard these stories, he'll when he is interviewed, he'll tell these stories about these men that he chaplained, and he'll tell the stories of the Nelson Mandelas, but then he also says there were so many men in there that don't get their stories told. And one in particular was a black lay Methodist preacher. His name was Robert Sobukwe. And Peter was young, and he was angry, and he was saying to Robert how they should, he was really angry at the Methodist lukewarmness around apartheid. He was really angry at Methodist lukewarmness around apartheid. And he said, Robert, the Methodists, you're a Methodist minister. They should be storming the jail. They should be demanding your release. They should be coming over and breaking down the jail cells. The bars should be pulled back. And Robert stopped him and he said, Peter, I'm not the prisoner. They are. So I'm not the prisoner, they are. In this moment, it's scary to rest. Because our people are prisoners of empire. Our people are prisoners of empire. Whether they are literal prisoners, right? This means something different in each context. Whether they're literal prisoners being detained and deported to prisons in El Salvador, or being locked up in concentration camps in Guantanamo Bay, or whether they are being locked up in the continuation of the new Jim Crow era of mass incarceration and the largest prison system that the world has ever seen. Sometimes our people are literal prisoners of empire. And sometimes our people are prisoners of empire because they love the empire. They're prisoners of empire because they love the empire, and they have bought into a mass psychosis that confuses America and Christianity, confuses national identity and Christianity. Our people need freedom. Wherever they are, however they are imprisoned by empire, our people need it, and they won't get it unless we as the church stand up and point to a different way. How could we possibly stop to rest in this moment? The stakes are too high, and it simultaneously feels too dangerous to stop, and I feel helpless to do anything. Amen? Resting feels like too great a risk. But that's where we are captured by the world as it is and not the world as it should be. And the earth itself has something to teach us about what faithful rest looks like. The Reverend Jeff Chu writes about this parable saying, faithful waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. The gardener waters, weeds, and fertilizes. And modern science is teaching us what happens in the meantime. Contrary to the peevish vineyard owner, nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted in this time of rest. Down below, the fig tree isn't just gathering strength. Listen to this. This kind of blew my mind as I read this. The fig tree isn't just gathering strength. It's building relationships. It's building relationships. Soil-borne fungi are finding home in its roots, boosting the tree's capacity to resist disease and take in nutrients. And in return, the tree feeds the fungi. There's relationships of mutuality happening beneath the surface. While the tree is not bearing fruit, there is so much happening underground, strengthening it for the time when it will. Faithful rest requires us to understand that, to uncapture, to liberate our minds from the sickness and addiction to producing that capitalism instills in us. Cole Arthur Riley says, remind us that when we pause or rest, we are restoring not only our bodies, but the very condition of the world held captive by greed and utility. We grow weary of societies who view us as more machine than human, more product than soul. More product than soul. We are building something different than the world that we have inherited. Every single one of us. We are building something different than what the powers that be, both the Democrats and the Republicans, we are building something different than what has been signed off on as normal, as okay, that rest is unnecessary, that Sabbath is unnecessary, that we should be worked so hard and exploited for so much that even in our time off of work, if we're lucky enough to get any, is spent slumped on the couch, exhausted, scrolling social media that continues to alienate us and make us sick. Sometimes we forget that we are not machine, we are creature. Amen? We are not machine, we are creature. And when we do that, I think we look back to the earth to show us what is good and what is necessary. The earth that God created and called good. Faithful rest is part of the process of bearing fruit. It is necessary for bearing fruit, but it's hard and it requires us to trust one another and to trust God and to trust that God does not abandon us to destruction, has never abandoned us to destruction, and will not fail us. We believe, Lord, help our unbelief. And I want to close with Cole Arthur Riley's prayer when resting feels too great a risk. Let's pray. Rested God, we want more than a life lived exhausted. That you have woven healing rhythms of rest into our mind and bodies reminds us we are worthy of habitual restoration. Remind us that when we pause or rest, We are restoring not only our bodies, but the very condition of a world held captive by greed and utility. We grow weary of societies who view us as more human than machine, more product than soul. The fear that we won't survive without overworking stalks our days. Liberate us from the depraved economic structures that require that the poor and vulnerable sacrifice their own rest at the altar of survival and opportunity. Remind us that the beauty and paradox of our humanness is that we were made to close our eyes that we might see. May it be so. Amen.